Now you see, order and randomness constitute, in other words, the warp and the woof. In order, everything's under control. In randomness, it's it's a mess. But we wouldn't know what order was unless we had messes. It's the contrast of order and messes that order itself depends upon. And so in exactly the same way, it is the contrast of on and off, there and not there. In other words, life and death, being and non-being, that constitutes existence. When you lose sight of the fact that the order principle and the random principle go together, that's exactly the same predicament as losing sight of the fact that all individually delineated things and beings are connected underneath.
Top of the morning, afternoon or evening, my fellow peasants. Welcome back. Tinful hats engaged for part 2 of a series of 16 theory deep dives. If you haven't seen part 1, where we explore the mother crystals, I highly recommend, nay, implore it, because it's big time context and I think you'll enjoy it. Link is in the description. But yeah, now assuming we're all on the same page, what is good, that opening clip is from one of my favourite teachers. You probably heard him somewhere, his voice, Alan Watts. And what he said there is going to be central to this video, and in my mind, central to Final Fantasy XVI. Chaos and order. There is so much to this concept, and indeed value and juice to be extracted, nuances that I would argue are so subtle to grasp, they almost completely eludes the Western mind. And for this reason, I'm pretty confident 16 is going to be a challenging and thought-provoking entry that is really going to leave an imprint. I'm going to say a lot of that confidence really does come from Yoshi P and his business division team, who across the entire journey of 14 have more than demonstrated both an interest and a deep understanding in the concept of polarity. Light and dark, order and chaos, active and passive, dependent, independent thinking, feeling, masculine, feminine, basically yin and yang. And these are just a few aspects that the human mind has identified, with the yin and yang in its exploration into duality, something that is both our prison and our gateway to freedom. And a really big example of this was Shadowbringers in 14, how it presented that a realm that has become too infused with light, because while Warrior of Light had done such a good job, that eventually what was needed was a WOD, a Warrior of Darkness, to bring it back to balance, because too much light is stagnation, and too much dark, maybe even with Final Fantasy 15 in the 10 years of darkness, is suffocation. Balance is needed, and while suggesting that this will be a base premise of 16 may sound uninspiring, or like it's just reinventing the wheel, hashing out old concepts, there's always far deeper, intriguing ways to explore and portray these universal truths, and I think doing so could give us a lot to go on with what's going to be happening in 16. So let's jump in. The icons. 8 big juicy kaiju scaled summons, all of which occupy different elemental affinity, of which there can only be one, until of course an Ifrit shows up and bamboozles everyone's mind. And this subject of polarization is interesting unto itself, even on an elemental chart aspect. This is also something that 14 explored, elements and how they complement, how they oppose, how they're all essential. Very cool also to Eastern philosophy, things like how ice and fire can interact, how that might be a reflection on Jill and Clive being Shiva and Ifrit, how fire can even show up different in its representation, between healing and growth versus destruction. And of course we're going to be seeing that with Joshua as Phoenix and the Dark Ifrit, something the game and its logo seem very heavily centered around, but we will discuss that bit another time. Another one is Air to Earth, representing themselves as opposites, like Benedict and Hugo maybe, and yet we've heard in the lore that the latter has something to learn from the former. Conflict and harmony giving way to each other in ebbs and flows, and these types of observations have been getting made by man for millennia in every corner and ideology of the world, but I would say that East has done a better job of it. So for today's video I want to focus on just one piece of polarity and duality, and that is chaos and order, and there's no two better characters to extract for this than Barnabas and Dion, of course. One of them is a highborn prince of Sambrique, loved by his people. He has spoony bards singing his tales, and he embodies Bahamut, the king of the summons, and he's affiliated with light. The other is a landless rogue who single-handedly conquered an entire continent with the power of Odin and represents dark. Now these two individuals are clearly huge players on the map. We've got Sambrique occupying all of Storm, basically the entire west section of the continent, and these guys are clearly your Holy Empire type, I know, like the Roman or the British Empire. Here to bring civility and order to a barbaric dying world. The other, on the east side, Ash, rules with chaotic ferocity in a ferociously blighted section of Philistia, overrun with orcs and beast tribes. And this is the superpower Barnabas now rules. So it's clear to see the significance of the divide in this world that is in play here. And what we know of nations that deem themselves as world police, like Sambrique, here to impose a system of order that all must follow, that ends up being tyranny. Conversely, an entirely chaotic system, like Barnabas's, is always doomed to collapse in on itself. Order provides that stability that we crave, the predictability to create rules and self-organise, but chaos creates the opportunities for change that we need. At least that is how it is to our Greek philosophy-descended minds. One that does work in rather linear, black and white, good or evil thinking patterns, and the reality is more evolved than that. And being that Clive is here to figure out the truth of this world, the Mother Crystal, the truth of it, and carve a path in this world, separate to Dion and Barnabas. This is what I believe. So I want to explore what that might be, the difference. So we know Dion and Barnabas, we know they're enemies. We see Odin and Bahamut doing battle in the game, and we hear from Dion that he will plunge it into chaos.
The chaos he would wreak would sweep all of Valisthea into the abyss.
So he actually identifies not just a war, but someone will cause this chaos. And while there's a chance he's talking about someone other than Barnabas, heck, it could even be Clive, I do think it's likely it's Barnabas. And that shows to us just how ideologically opposed these two nations are. Sambrique wants to manage the blight and the diminishing ether resources in the world by controlling all the crystals. Now, presumably I could speculate deciding how it's managed, how it's shared, that they know best on how to keep the Mother's light shining strong. And I think this because they are clearly very pro-Mother Crystal. They worship a mother, a goddess deity as their one true deity, that their emperor is the reincarnation, literal or otherwise, as we discussed in the last video. Like we also discussed angels, and how they obey and work for God absent of free will. And this is the significance, in my opinion, of the halos. These halos that we see in the cosmogony artwork, all the icons have them, and so too does this goddess statue in Sambrique, meaning we could speculate that not just Dion as Bahamut is following this singular deity's commands, but all the summons are. All of them, absent of free will, work on behalf of the Mother Crystal, or the goddess, if she does indeed exist. So how does this work with Barnabas? This really bugged me up, guys, for a while, because we know the Mother Crystals are dying, and we know that Barnabas loves it, that he's thriving off it, that he wants it. And even in his bio on the Japanese website, it says how beautiful the disappearance of the Mother Crystal is. So, this made me first think, especially with him being the antithesis of Dion, dark to his light, that Barnabas too wants to end the Mother Crystal's reign, like Clive is. In my early thinking of this game, I combined that with Barnabas saying that he wants to unite all the dominants, something we see Clive literally doing in his own body, and I couldn't work out how Clive and Barnabas's motives were different. Like, when you piece that together, it seems like they want the same thing. And certainly, how would it be strong enough, their differences, that it's to a degree that he sends Benedicta out to hunt down Clive? Why, if they have the same motives? And I first pinned it on the idea that they do both have the same motives. It's just the case that Barnabas doesn't understand Clive's, or he wants to do it in a different manner. He wants to be the hero. He has the Messiah complex, and that his method of being the hero is by encouraging the dominants to cast off their humanity, like he has himself. And Clive's going to be the one that represents the humanity. Because Barnabas clearly wants the dominants to go beyond the breaking point of their insanity. this insanity that we see, the degradation in the summons, so that the immaculate version of the icon can emerge. In other words, the raw primal power of the summon unrestrained by a weak human will controlling it. Okay, that's a pretty big difference, but it didn't explain the halo for me, the angelic halo. Because how could Barnabas also be glad the Mother Crystal is disappearing, even waging a war against the main empire that worships her, yet still be in service to her? My original theory that Barnabas wants to go at this goddess being as well as Clive, it didn't make sense for this very reason. I know it's small, a little freaking halo, but these things are painted in for a reason. And then it clicked. It clicked, my friends. It's simple. He loves chaos. He's just a chaos boy. It's because he wants a world of instability. So while his bio says the disappearance of the Mother Crystal is beautiful, it also says, and in his eyes as he stares at the chaotic Philistia, there is a chilling eeriness. Now one interpretation could be that it's chilling because he looks at it with joy and approval. Basically that he sees this state of the world as favourable. And again, depleting ether, as written in the lore, the very nature of the Mother Crystals existing, is what is leading to this chaos, to more conflict, and more conflict means more weaponizing of the icons and bringing them into battle, and that all leads to a stronger degree of the degradation in the dominance, where the process of them losing their minds is accelerated to a point that Barnabas perceives them as becoming superior. So putting all of that together, guys, my theory is that he still wants the Mother Crystal system in place. He doesn't want to end it. He just likes it in its depleted, chaotic stage. That's the beauty. And perhaps seeing when the world wasn't depleted, so when the Mother Crystal was strong, I could kind of speculate that he saw it was something that allowed humans to be indulgent, egocentric or greedy, creating a world of tyrannical order and self-aggrandizement that we definitely get a sense of from Sambrique and its emperor, and that's what he wants to end, whether he's been a victim of it himself. And yeah, I know that distinction seems subtle, but it really places Barnabas, Clive and Dion worlds apart, and at the same time it also sets them up for some curious motives and even potential alliances. Because if indeed this halo thing is real, and that two of them embodying icons with halos, and one who doesn't, Clive, as Ifrit, who again doesn't appear in the pantheon. He is the Ifrit who is the Jinn of free will, who doesn't serve God. And that, my friends, is why I can see now a logical explanation for why Dion is here. If this is indeed Dion. So I did think it was a woman at first, who could be the missing Leviathan dominant. I had that theory. But as many of you have pointed out, you think it's a man, just somewhat effeminate in features, like Dion is. Then you see the glint of the earring, also like Dion has. And that this could just be him on the third time skip with longer kind of hobo-ish hair. He looks like he's had a rough time. And of course in an alternative outfit. Because again, like we covered in the first vid, we do see outfit changes on time skips. And this one certainly does appear culturally similar to one Dion's wearing. Like the frills that are on it. It's a bit of a floofy little outfit. So I'm going to make this theory in the belief that this is indeed Dion stood next to Barnabas. So the question is, why would the embodiment of chaos and order, dark and light, be in the same room working together later in this game when we clearly see them working against at the beginning? And I pondered on this, Pezzies, I pondered long and hard, and first I thought, well, it could be because of the big bad goddess. That she's been pulling Sambrique's strings, and I do think that is the case. I do still think that is the darkness residing in Dion's nation that his bio is referencing, and this to me at least set up the motive for Barnabas raising an army to take her out. After defeating Dion in battle, maybe he took Dion as a prisoner and reveals to him the systematic corruption of his nation at the core of what it is that they're worshipping, and that they would team up to take out this controlling corrupt goddess. But again, halos imply that they can't do that. So now my theory brain wholly got thinking, what if it's not the goddess they're teaming up against? What if it's Clive they're teaming up against? After all, it makes sense, right? Clive is breaking into their nation and he's hell-bent on a mission to destroy the entire system that they both ideologically approve of. They both approve of the Mother Crystal system, just to different polarizing degrees and outcomes. And that's something that they could perpetually fight for dominance over, but ending it, like Clive is trying to, now that's a problem. That makes Clive an even bigger threat, and maybe Dion and Barnabas teaming up is an enemy of my enemy is a friend type scenario. Oh, I could really see this being it, guys, in some form or another. And the thematic relevance of this would be so cool. Not only from a religious narrative standpoint, because a lot of what I perceive with the Mother Crystal system is it represents itself in a Western way, in a Christian, Catholic, and even Zoroastrianism type of mentality. Zoroastrianism, which is one of the earliest religions, had a lot of influence on a lot of Western religions that dominates. Also the Greek world, which is kind of a branch of where our modern day philosophy stems from. And all of these ideologies share something similar in that they are very dualistic in creating strong, firm, strict even, ideological frameworks around the premise of good and evil. All of them are monotheistic, meaning they believe in just one singular supreme deity, and that it's valid to fight or die or go to war over determining what that true being's credence is, and to fight for good against evil. And it's a very rigid lens to look at the world through. All of them have very rigid ways of viewing free will, what happens after death, no judgment. All of them have a conception of heaven, hell, angels, and more importantly, demons. So think about it, Clive in this scenario can meet both Dion and Barnabas' ideological wrath in the fact that he is here to break the Mother Crystal, looking to bring about a true free will from God, and being that he is an Ifrit, he is literally a demon. That's what he represents, and therefore he's a heathen in their limited thinking. And is limited thinking. This is why bloodshed, crusades, religious oppression has plagued the Western world so much more prolifically than it has Eastern traditions like Hinduism, Taoism or Buddhism, and it's because it's a fundamental flaw in how we see chaos and order, light and dark, the very nature of the yin and yang symbol. And this misviewing, misrepresentation of what it truly means is one that forms the historical backdrop of all of our cultural viewpoints. It's one that we still all suffer from today. This problem is so systemic, and in my personal soy boy hippie view of the world and what I aspire to break out from, is why we have all the problems we have today. Why our societies as a whole are serpents eating their own tails, why it's causing the collapse and the degradation of society as we know it, and we may end up driving this whole game into an apocalyptic dystopia rather than a utopia. I know that sounds big, but what is this problem I'm talking about? Well, one term for this problem is called light chasing. There's a really cool book called The Dark Side of Light Chasers. We're all kind of guilty of this. A lot of people just think that woke culture today, the only ones guilty of this. No. Many teachers, gurus, life coaches, and everyone, not just new age thinkers, are guilty of living their life and painting a picture that we can reach light and progress and happiness, the very fundamental mechanisms that lead us in the pursuit of happiness, that we can achieve these things without going into things like anger, shame, the ugly, painful parts that we have long run from and denied, that we can bypass them. Skip over feeling all of these ugly traits or going through these dark gates in full to purge and shake them from our nervous systems and our conditioning. That if we just knuckle down and work hard enough, or attain enough money or freedom or real estate, if we attend enough motivational seminars, or we start writing gratitude journals, that this is all that is required to get ourselves to happiness. And Adi Ashanti said it great in this book titled The End of Your World as to why this isn't true. He says, make no mistake about it, enlightenment is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It's seeing through the facade of pretense. It's the complete eradication of everything we imagined to be true. Damn, man, and think of how that relates, how that sounds to Final Fantasy XVI, especially when Clive is essentially here to unravel the truth of the Mother Crystals. He figures it out. I think his bio says Clive eventually learns the truth about the world and sets his sights on destroying the Mother Crystal. So this is why I do believe that Clive will be inherently destructive. And we see him on a revenge arc. We see his body literally burning up and becoming an Ifrit. That he will either be something in the vein of an anti-hero or an anti-villain, more so than just a straight hero or a warrior of light, because light chasing and seeing life in polarized opposition is fundamentally what roots itself at the problem also of 16's conflicts. Because these nations perceiving things in good, evil, right, wrong, chaos and order, what they're all missing and not realizing is that while order does provide the stability that we crave and again chaos creates the opportunities that we need, while this seems so obvious when you say it, it's actually the most elusive and biggest challenge to the ego construct there is. The biggest problem that humanity is facing. Because very few truly come to realize, and damn man, I am not saying this from a position that I've come to realize yet. This is what I personally am on a journey of trying to understand, and this is kind of why I went in the wilderness and went on bikepacking journeys to really tussle with this, put myself in uncomfortable, seemingly scary or fraught with peril situations, getting lost, tired, cold, hungry, achy, and to try to not label it, to not have a preference, to not run away from it and put myself in a more comfortable situation or more pleasurable one. Because let's be honest guys, for me at least in my life, and how much of your existence, your fears, failures or shortcomings, how much were actually rooted, when you think about it, in the pursuit of pleasure and the aversion of pain. Not really accepting that they are one and the same thing. And this is what the Western mind sees the yin-yang symbol as. They see it as a tale of opposites. Two fish, separate, trying to eat each other. Missing these dots that are here at the center, these ones of the opposite color within the body of its polarity. What these dots are here to tell us is that within one exists the other. It's not just that they follow each other in cycles. It's not just one is a counterbalance to the other, an opposite. It's that they are each other. And that both Dion and Bahamut are unknowingly one and the same. That while they think they are enemies and working towards different agendas, they are both still working under the Mother Crystal system. That Dion's nation striving for order also is what causes chaos, as we see in this part of the trailer.
Yet for every citizen who falls, another can be bred. For every home that burns, another can be built. The Empire will live on.
And similarly, that Barnabas embodying the void and chaos, that in a way he's also bringing about order. Something that we actually do hear him proclaim.
I unite the dominants, that we may bring an end to the strife, and found a new order to see us unto tomorrow.
Right there, found a new order. So he does say it. So he is aware of order, yet his method is to oppose the current order with anarchy. So Odin and Bahamut, in my theory, in my speculation, is that they represent, in Final Fantasy XVI, a Western model of thinking, limited and one that only creates suffering, whereas Clive is an Eastern model that looks to transcend duality by essentially embodying both, showing to the world, showing to these nations, and showing to us, the player, that chaos and order are the same. And how clear does that seem when you bring in robed, hooded guy, or blue and red eyes Ifrit, the second icon of fire, and Clive clashing, but both being the same. Both are Ifrits. That's why, guys, I really wouldn't be surprised if robed hooded guy is like an anti-Clive, or bears Clive's resemblance in some way. Because I speculate that the resolution to beating this Ifrit isn't going to be in just simply destroying it. It's going to be more complex than that. It's maybe going to be almost like Persona-esque, you know, when they fight their shadow selves, and it's either through accepting, integrating, or embodying the dark side, the dark counterpart, that is what brings about a resolution, you know, some Carl Jung-esque type of theme, and that they won't just play on chaos and order and two Ifrits fighting each other. It won't just work on that scale, that it will then scale all the way up to what roots at the center of this game, which is the acceptance of life and death being one and the same. I do think this is what is ultimately at the base of the logo's meaning, and that the main cosmogony being, we see that it being made up of both Ifrit and Phoenix. The symbology of it is that when man fell because they challenged the gods in this game, they fell because they lost their way to what is true harmony, because they wanted immortality. They wanted life without death. The book of Joshua in 16 really supports this because it says Phoenix has always been the most coveted of all summons. Most coveted, that is what humans crave the most, life over death, and that very nature is what caused man to fall into dualistic thinking, and this is what puts them at odds with God. The Tao is another word for it. Tao simply being the natural way of things in Taoism. And Taoism is good because it recognizes that both yin and yang are good, fundamentally good and necessary. That we must have a balance of masculine and feminine. Interesting that Dion is kind of effeminate, Barnabas is very manly. I don't see there's any coincidence. To explore both light and dark in our lives, to live in both chaos and order, and to awaken to them as being a singular principle, not two separate categories, which is so often the case in the Western mind. And that if Clive, by playing the role of Ifrit, in being perceived as a world and destroying the crystals, like think about that, like if even by playing the villain or the archdemon, whatever it is what leads Barnabas and Dion to being in the same room, working together as well as uniting all the dominants, even if it is in opposition to Clive. If Clive does indeed become this cosmogony demon thing, and that all of them have to team up and repeat the cosmogony art depicted here, by either ending the mother crystals, by actually fighting a goddess, by becoming Zodablos, I'm still going to cover that on the next video, my friends, well then will Clive not have done his job? If the problem with the world in Valistia is that life, death, chaos and order, light and dark have become oppositional to one another, but they have to team up, and then in a way Clive has actually uncovered for mankind and the world the middle path that Buddha spoke about, that many Eastern religions and traditions are much stronger, in my opinion, of presenting. And that's ultimately what true liberation is. That is what brings a person to a state of harmony. And that's why I want to leave off, same as how we started this whole vid, with an insight from Alan Watts. I really like this one, guys. So Alan said, what looks like chaos at one level is harmony at another. This sudden dawning on your consciousness that life is not really a contest to make yes triumph over no, to make a positive triumph over a negative, the two sides go together. Then one sees in this strange way that underlying all that is negative in the world, all that is in the way painful and evil, that there is a kind of necessity to it. It goes with the good, it is necessary for the good. Disorder is necessary for the manifestation of order, just as you must have a black background to show up a light figure. And then one sees that a profound transformation takes place in one's attitude toward the world. That is to say that instead of looking upon life as a contest, it becomes a dance, it becomes a game. One doesn't withdraw from it, one doesn't stop living, but one goes into the game so that these revolving fishes are no longer trying to eat each other, but just going around, dancing, having the biggest fun in the world. So then, must we have fixed in our minds the idea that all forms and patterns of nature are simply methods of attack or defense? That they are devices for camouflage? That they are simply lures for sexual attractions or other utilitarian purposes? Or can we see them a dance, a joyous cosmology? Ooh, deep, Alan. Man, I wish I was half as articulate as that man is, but there we go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and it acts more than anything, maybe less than a theory, and more as a framework to what underlying messages might be showing up in Final Fantasy 16. It is just a speculation, but I think it would be really cool and would be really powerful, and I see a lot of things in 16 hinting at it really could be. Anyway, guys, if you did like it, you know the button to hit to indicate that. Subscribes and comments, they are the best kind of thanks you can give. I really want to know your thoughts, and then extra support is becoming a YouTube member or a patron to the channel, of which there is a link down in the description. And then finally, big shout out to Genetic from Titans Peasants tier for their long support. It's so very appreciated, as well as to all the other legends who will be appearing in the credit sequence. Many thanks, guys. Until the next video, Pezzy Wezzy Doodahs. Kopo!